We're excited to talk to this guy. Of course, it's PHNX Cardinals. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Leave a like on this video. Aaron Schatz joins us to promote the FTN Football Almanac. It's a really in-depth breakdown of all things 2024 NFL season. And Aaron, thanks for joining us, my man.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to people about the book. I'm ready for the season. I'm ready for some football. Summertime is over.
Absolutely. We were talking off air, Aaron, just about this spring and the draft, and now it's time for real tangible football, right? And I do want to draw your attention to our precious Arizona Cardinals, and they have made wholesale changes. They were for a long time, Aaron, not an analytically based team. They are leaning into that. I think now more than ever, they've drafted players that have an heavy emphasis on how they tested in the offseason. They took a kid out of Illinois and Tip Raymond, who basically tested off the charts and has very little on-field resume to speak to at the University of Illinois. So all that to say, when you look at this team, maybe what they did last year into this year, what should Cardinal fans be fired up about in 2024 with this team?
I mean, it's not hard to say this team will be better than last year because they've been 4-13 for 2 straight years. I mean, we're not high on them overall, but I think that they did have a good offseason. They added some good pieces. If Kyler Murray can find that Kyler Murray from the first half of 2021 again, this team could be something. So that's sort of what the hope is, right? Is that the defense is better. They've added pieces. The good things will happen. But a lot of it depends on whether Kyler Murray can sort of find that potential that he showed a couple years ago, because he just hasn't been that guy since his injuries.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, let me ask you this though: does it have to take Kyler Murray disappearing into a phone booth and then reappearing in a Superman outfit for this Arizona Cardinals, especially offensively, to take that next step? Because it really feels like, for the first time in his career, the infrastructure that he's playing within, whether it's the personnel on the roster, on the offensive side of the football, the play calling, is in a better spot than it's ever been. What if Kyler Murray comes back and he's not, the 2021 quarterback that played at an MVP level clip for 7 to 8 weeks, but it's a guy that can play consistently through 17 games of the season?
I mean, they've definitely done some good stuff. There's no question about it. Everyone loves Harrison as a prospect. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's sort of weird.
Okay.
In our projection system, all other things being equal, teams that take wide receivers high in the draft actually tend to do a little worse. And then they tend to do a little better in the second year. Now, I know that you can come up with certainly historical examples of teams that had rookie wide receivers who had awesome seasons, and those offenses were suddenly much better. But just if you look at every team over the last decade or so, you end up with this sort of interesting idea where offenses don't necessarily take that big step forward when the guy's in his first year, but more when the guy's in his second year. So that's sort of an interesting thing when you look at Harrison and what he's going to bring to the team. Like, I'm sure he's going to be put up big numbers. There's no doubt that he's number one. He's the number one receiver. But he may bring more to them as far as efficiency once he learns the league a little bit than he does in the first year.
You had an article, ESPN, about 2 weeks ago, and beyond Marvin Harrison Jr., Aaron, it talked about the Cardinals having a core of young players, blue chippers, under 25. That included, of course, MHJ, but then you have the likes of second-year players, Paris Johnson Jr., Michael Wilson. Do you feel like with this team, Aaron, they're in a position, let's say they don't make the playoffs this year, but they're at least trending in the direction of building from the draft, developing from within, something that's very foreign to this franchise, by the way?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Again, a lot depends on Murray and who Murray is and what happens to him over the next couple of years. But there's no question that they are building to the draft, and there is that core of young talent. McBride, a lot of lower drafted young corners, but you figure one of them is going to, at least one of them is going to come out of that as a good player, right? Like there is a good core of young talent here for them to build around.
In your 20th edition of this guide, which, has team projections, advanced proprietary analytics, and covers every single team, I highly encourage people to check it out for themselves with the FTN Football Almanac. But what was maybe the thing that stood out to you most while you guys were compiling all your data on the Arizona Cardinals?
Interesting question. What stood out the most about the Cardinals? It's interesting because I edit, but I didn't write the chapter. So I think for me, I didn't realize just how much Murray has struggled in the, since he came back from the injury. You think of him as that guy from 2021, and he hasn't been. I think deep passing in particular, he was really bad. If I remember correctly, he was really bad on deep passes last year. And God, he should be better than that. That the talent and the potential is there, right? We've seen it.
Let me ask you this. So moving off of Kyler Murray, and let's go to his head coach. So I think one of the things that has hurt the Cardinals is the division that they play in, with the likes of Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and then historically Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll exits the division now. Jonathan Gannon now with a year under his belt. The team, I think, played above expectations from an effort standpoint. Now the personnel is slowly starting to catch up. What do you make of Jonathan Gannon after year one? For a lot of people that thought, hey, this is going to be a one and done coach. They kind of cast him aside in Philadelphia after a performance against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, which happens to a lot of people. This is a guy who had 70 sacks career year in Philadelphia just 2 years ago. Now he's the Cardinals head coach, coming off what I think a lot of Cardinal fans think is a very positive year one culture building block.
Hey, I'm an analytics guy, right? So I like guys who go for it on fourth down.
Yeah.
We have this aggressiveness index. Jonathan Gannon was number 1. So of course I like him. Goes for it on fourth down, right? Like how can you, as far as the other things, I don't think we've seen a mismanagement of the locker room or anything like that yet. He's a defensive guy who had a really bad defense last year.
Yeah.
So, let's see if he can improve that. But coaching decision-wise, I think, he did a reasonable job in his first year.
Aaron Schatz, for those who don't know, he's the father, the creator of DVOA, which is a stat that you see a lot if you spend time on the Twitter streets, as we do, that either tell the story of your team or sometimes tell the story of why things went south. Is there anything, a common denominator as far as DVOA, let's say offensively or defensively, that might point to a team making a jump from one season to the next?
You look at things that make teams make jumps, certainly playing better than their record the year before matters. Turnover margin, teams that don't get a lot of takeaways tend to regress in a positive fashion. On defense, adding a lot of personnel, adding good rookies on defense helps a lot. And so, you put all those things together and you get an idea of which teams are going to jump. I really don't have a team jumping this year. Okay. I don't really have a team that is suddenly a Super Bowl contender that wasn't really one last year. Every team, even Cincinnati really, I think ended up with a winning record. So this happens to be a year where we don't see a lot of change. We don't expect a lot of change from year to year.
We talked about the Cardinals and potentially their floor, Aaron. I'll get you out of here on this. Back-to-back 4-win seasons. Best case scenario for this team. I know you mentioned Kyler Murray. Let's get him back to MVP status. But Cardinals have a lot. Let's just assume a lot of things go right for this team this year. Health, development of young players. What do you kind of cap their ceiling to be in a vaunted NFC West, yet with a conference itself that could lend itself to maybe a surprise or two at the wild card spot?
Yeah, I don't expect that they're going to be Super Bowl contenders, even in the best case scenario. But if the defense plays a lot better and guys mature and add interior linemen that they added play well, and Murray plays well and Harrison is really good as a rookie, they could absolutely be wild card contenders. Now, their schedule is tough. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the NFC West has tough schedules, partly because they have to play each other. Mm-hmm. So we have their schedule projected as the 6th hardest schedule in the league. So that makes it tough, even if they do play better than expectations.
That's rough, especially with the schedule and the gauntlet that they kind of went through last year. Tons of loaded with playoff teams and teams that took a leap forward. Make sure you're following Aaron on Twitter at @AShotsNFL. That's shots with an A. And of course, you're checking out the latest work right now on the FTM Football Almanac. Last question. I'm a huge fan of Moneyball, which is the analytical side of Major League Baseball, and of course the story of the Oakland Athletics that changed the game. Kevin Youkilis was the king of walks, or the father of locks, an analytical darling. Who do the Cardinals own? Any analytical darlings in your opinion?
I'm trying to think of who kind of is an analytical darling these days.
Yeah.
Nobody stands out in my mind. A player who's an analytical darling these days, Nick Chubb. Any analysis that people try to do that separates running backs from their blocking, like yards above expectations, if you look at where the blockers were, like when the handoff takes place, always come out with Chubb as really good. So he is definitely a modern day analytical darling. But yeah. I can't think of anyone on the Cardinals where I'm like, yeah, that guy. Like, I mean,
I feel like James Conner
sure
could fit
analytics
that.
People like Budda Baker, but everyone likes Budda Baker. So, that's nothing special.
Aaron, we appreciate the time. Again, check him out. FTN Fantasy, the Chiefs Analytic Officer. Check out his almanac for the 2024 NFL season. We're recording this, Aaron. It's Prime Week. I'm pretty sure I've got your book in my cart right now. So we appreciate you and your time, my friend.
Get that sucker delivered. Awesome.